At long last, we've done all the steps to finally make our 3D door model. Ironically, this should be a short video as you've already learned everything that you need to do to finish this. When we left our hero, we'd use the 2D clip surface commands to cut the doorway out of the 4x8 and then the trim. So go back to the previous video if you need to know how to do that. I'm going to switch to the right isometric view using the 3 key on my full-size number pad. But remember, you can click on the corners of the cube gizmo. You can hold down your middle mouse button and select it from the pie menu, or you can reach up to the view menu. You do not need to be an isometric view to extrude or work in 3D, but if we're looking at it from this angle, it'll make it easier to see what we're doing. Now first select the 6" by 4" rectangle that is the trim at the top of the door. And do you remember the command for extrude? Control or Command E, E for extrude. And if you remember from our section view that we drew a while back, we decided to make this trim 2 inches thick. So go ahead and type 2 into the extrusion field and then click OK. And look, it's now a 3D object. And let's do the same for the trim around the door. Select that and then Ctrl E and enter 0.75 or 3/4 for 1 by stock and then hit OK. And then now select the door flat itself and Ctrl E, but this time let's work smarter, not harder. Now we know that these 2 pieces of trim that we just extruded will be nailed onto the face of the flat or wall, right? But if we extrude +4, the thickness of our flat, then both of those trim shapes will be buried at the back of the 4 inches, and we'll have to go in there and move them. So let's not do that. Instead, type -4 inches in the extrusion field, and that will push the flat down away from the backs of the trim, keeping everything in the correct place. So extruding with a positive number will push the shape up or toward the view, and extruding with a negative number will push the extrusion down or away from the camera. Now take a moment to appreciate your work by holding down Control and your middle mouse button to orbit around your objects. You can also select the Flyover tool, the little icon that looks like Saturn. Shift-C is the keyboard shortcut for that. If you select the tool or you use the shortcut, you'll need to hit your X key to get back out of the flyover mode. But if you're using the Control middle mouse, it just snaps back to the previous tool as soon as you let up on your fingers. So get yourself back to the right isometric view in your favorite way. Number pad 3, the nav cube corners, the middle mouse pie menu, or the view dropdown. Now, let's do this panel door. There's a lot of ways to do this, but I think the way I'm going to show you is the easiest for beginners. We made the rail and the stiles of this door 2 inches thick, remember? And the panel needs to be centered in the middle, so the panel's 1/2 inch thick. So select both the panel and the door and right-click to clip that surface again, just like we did previously. But don't delete the panel, we still need that. So with the center panel selected, Ctrl E to extrude and enter either 0.5 or 1/2, and then OK. And now select the polyline that is the rail and stiles, and then extrude that to 2 inches, just like we drew in our section way back when. Great, now let's put the panel in the middle of the 2 inches. Again, there are many ways to do this, but let's do it the fast and the accurate and the lazy way. So first reach up into the view bar in the visualization section and find the drop down next to the teapot icon. It says shaded right now. Shaded fills the surface of our 3D shapes with a simple fill that lets us see the 3D objects easier by shading the planes differently, kind of creating light and dark sides. But that fill can also get in the way sometimes. Remember, you can always hold down the B key to temporarily hide the fills. That's that X-ray view while you're holding the B key down. But go ahead and select wireframe from the list. Ctrl-Shift-W is the hotkey for that. Wireframe displays only the edges of objects so we can see through them. Now switch to the front view, and you have 4 ways of doing that. However, let me pause for a moment and just show you how the number pad works. If you have a full-size keyboard with a number pad to the right, it's by far the fastest way to move around in 3D. Make sure your number lock button is on, and then hit the big 0 key. That will always take you back to top plan view. That will turn off any render settings, lighting, perspective, textures, etc., and just kind of go back to the drafting world. 1, 3, 7, and 9, the corner keys, move you into isometric views. That's looking at 3 sides of an object but with no perspective. And we've been using that right front isometric, and that's the 3 key. But 1 is left, and 7 and 9 are rear, left, and right. So it's kind of making sense here. The 2 key is the front view. 4 and 6 are left and right, and 8 is back. So you can see how it's kind of like a compass or a joystick. 5, by the way, is top view, and that will be looking down on your object, but it'll leave all the 3D rendering settings like perspective and lighting on. So if you want to look straight down at your model, but you don't want to turn off all the prettiness, you can hit the 5 key. If you have a number pad on your keyboard, I strongly encourage you to use that to navigate. It just takes an instant to change your views. But if you don't have that, use the middle mouse pie menu or the navigation cube. You really only need to reach up to the view bar if you want one of these unusual views like the lower, left, right, rear isometric or one of those. You can get to those with the other ways too, but it's a little more tricky. So however you do it, get into the front view on your number pad or use the cube or the pie menu. And the icon is the house where you're looking straight at it and you can see the front door. And remember, we drew our door in top plan, so it's still kind of lying on the shop floor, so we haven't rotated it up vertically yet. So front view is actually looking at what would be the bottom when we're finished, just to be clear with that. Now, since we're looking at the door in front view, we are still in a flat orthographic space where X and Y work as up and down and side to side. So we could be very sloppy and just use the nudge tool and kind of just eyeball it into place, but that would be slow and inaccurate, so that's not good. We could just select the panel and then use Ctrl M to move the door up 3/4 of an inch, but that would take a little bit of math. We could have stayed in the 3D view and used Ctrl Shift M, which would have given us the true 3D move, and we could have moved it up 3/4 of an inch on the Z axis. We could even have not cut out the hole in the middle of the door and then extruded the panel and then mirrored it to the other side. So we had 2 cookie cutters at the front and the back, and then use those two to subtract solids and kind of carve the recesses out of the door slab. That would work too. There's probably a few more. But in the spirit of fast, accurate, and lazy, what should we do? You've seen this command before. Any guesses? With both the door and the panel selected, we can control or command equals. The equals button, plus equals up there by your backspace. So control or command equals, and then align and center on this right-hand side. And then hit OK, and there you go. And double points if you remember that align distribute is in the right-click context menu if you have 2 or more things selected. In this case, we'd want to use align middle. Well, while we have both parts selected, use the Ctrl M command and put -4 into the Y field to move the door to the back of the flat. And now switch back to the right isometric view and shaded view and check out your door. Now, just for fun, I'm going to quickly make the doorknob. It's kind of optional, and you can follow along if you want, but I'm going to move a little faster and use some new tools fairly quickly just for time. First, I'm going to select the circle that was our 2D doorknob, and I'm going to shrink its diameter down to 1 inch in the object info so I can reuse this as the stem of the knob. I'll Ctrl E to extrude that to 1 inch. Next, I'll select the rounded rectangle that is the escutcheon plate, and I'll Ctrl E and extrude it up to 1/4 of an inch, or 0.25. Now I'll find the 3D modeling toolset. In older versions, this icon is a cone, a sphere, and a cube. In recent versions, it's turned into this twisted cube. It's kind of like a blue X there. And this tool won't be in the fundamentals version of Vectorworks, unfortunately. I'm going to select the 3D sphere tool. That icon should be fairly easy to identify. And then I'll hover over the end of the cylinder looking for that center hint, and then click when I see the center hint, and expand the circle to about 1 inch radius. And just for fun, I'll use the fillet tool. It's fillet for food and fillet for architecture. I'll set the radius to 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll click on the preferences button and I'll select faces. And then when I hover over the front plate, it turns red. And I'll click on it and then click the green checkbox up in the mode bar, and that's going to round off all the hard edges off of that front face. So jump into front view and select the sphere and use my up arrow to nudge it up a bit so we can see the stem. And then I'll shift select all 3 parts and Ctrl G to group them into 1 part. And still in front view, I'll use Ctrl M again and -2 to drop it down onto the face of the door. And then with that group selected, I'll find the mirror tool, making sure that I'm in duplicate mode. And I'll look for a center hint on the door or the panel, and then mirror out a copy for the back side of the door. And finally, I'll select both the doorknob groups and the frame and the panel of the door and Ctrl G again to make a group of all of the door parts. And then the last step, and this is where you should jump back in if you didn't do the doorknob modeling, I'm going to hit the X key for the selection tool, and then I'm going to draw a marquee around all the door parts. I'll hit my 6 key to switch to the right view, or use whatever method you want. Just check that you are in right side view. and then type Ctrl or Command L to rotate the selected objects 90 degrees relative to the current view. That shortcut and its buddy Ctrl Shift R to rotate 90 in the other direction are a pair of my favorite keyboard shortcuts. We could have used the rotate tool and clicked on a pivot and checked that we were in working plane mode, and then pulled out a control point and then held down the Shift key so we could rotate it up 90 degrees into position and then click. Or you could learn the keyboard shortcuts like Ctrl L that does all that with one bang of the keyboard. I know there's a lot of hotkeys, but the sooner you learn them, the faster your work will go. There you go. Finally, our 3D model of our door flat. In the next video, we'll start doing things like the big kids and create viewports and sheet layers of our door flat and start making Vectorworks do all the drawing for us. Thanks again.